This is episode number 71. Today is Monday, September 14, 2020. Cash balance plan part 5. Fixed rate versus market rate crediting. This is the 39.6 Facebook Live Finance Show, the show that teaches high earners like yourself how to make your money work for you so you don't have to work for your money. We talk general investing, retirement accounts, taxes, real estate, syndications, Airbnb, and even the car you drive. Today we continue our series on cash balance plans because this is just far too much to cover in one session. Thank you everybody for joining. We're up to 7 people here. Awesome. If you can hear me and you can see me, please let me know where you are coming from. Please feel free to make comments and I will try to answer them. And happy Monday podcast launch day. Today was the launch day for the Medicine, Marriage, and Money podcast, my wife's podcast. So that is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and directly from her website, marriagemedicineandmoney.com. That's and with an A-N-D. And we have, that has to be Faryal coming from Honolulu. Thank you. Aloha and mahalo for coming. All right. So we are going to cover part 5 here on cash balance plans. So this is going to be a little bit nuts and boltsy, but this is very, 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 very important because this is what makes cash balance plans a complete no-brainer. Okay. There were a lot of reasons to be concerned before, but much less now. Starting in 2010, there was a proposal that cash balance plans could have a market-based return, which means the amount of the return in the fund would be dependent on the actual investments and the actual rate of return of those investments, as opposed to a fixed crediting method. Sorry, did not mean to do that. Okay, so here I have, similar to what I posted yesterday, years 2020 through 2026. Okay, so if we invest $100,000 per year, 100,000, 200,000, 300, 4, 5, 6, 700,000 is your total invested capital by the end of the 7th year. Now, let's say the goal is 4% per year, and we're not going to include the first year because, for example, 2020, you're just going to get this plan open this year, and you're just going to fund it probably like in January, February, or March. So there won't be any actual return for 2020, and you don't have to plan on that because you're investing it post the year. But that is your goal, and historically, with more traditional types of cash balance plans, you had to have a fixed rate crediting, so it would be the same amount every single year, irrespective of what's actually invested. Now, on the right column here, I say what the actual return was. So the first year it's 0 because the money wasn't even in there. And then in 2021, the pool earns 2%. You get credited to your account at the end of the year. And so we have to choose how much we're going to credit the account. The goal is to get a 4% return. So from that 100,000, we would add 4,000 plus the 100,000 of new contributions. Yesterday I used $1 million. It made the numbers too wide here. So I'm just going to assume this is a small pension. This could just be your own pension all by yourself as a 1099. You put 100,000 the first year, you expect it to gain 4%. So it's 104,000, and then you add another 100,000 of contributions. So you're expecting to be at 204. But because it actually only earned 2% that first year, the actual balance in the pool of the pension is only 202,000. Now, you have to credit your account, the hypothetical account for each person. Let's pretend it's just one person here. So if we're going to use the 4% fixed rate of return crediting method, that person should be at $204,000. But because the investments didn't actually earn $4,000, if we were to use the market-based crediting method, it would only be credited with $2,000. Okay. Now, yeah, you'd be like, well, I'd rather have my account credited for $204,000 instead of $202,000. Yeah, but there's only $202,000 in the account. So if you're just a participant in a pension, yeah, you would love to have your pension be worth more than is actually in there, but that's what puts pensions at risk. Okay, and I'm talking about this from the standpoint of you getting a plan open for your company and the risks of doing so. So if you use a market-based crediting method, you only have to credit the account for 2%, which means that the deficit is zero. Okay, so if you use market-based crediting, there's no deficit. Whereas if you use the fixed rate crediting method, you had to credit it with $4,000, but there wasn't $4,000 in the pension. There was only $2,000. So you are now in a deficit of $2,000. So the pension is underwater. Now, let's say the next year, there's 3% loss of the entire pool. So that's not good. You're losing $6,000 from the $204,000. So then you add another $100,000 and the actual balance is $296,000. Now it should be at $312,000, but it's only at $296,000. So now there's even more of a deficit because not only did you not get to 4%, but you didn't even stay above water. You didn't even stay above zero. So now we are in a bad situation. The actual balance of the fund is $296,000. That is less than the original invested principal of $300,000. This plan is completely underwater by all definitions. Not only is it below the fixed rate crediting, but it's below a 0% return. So you can't even meet the preservation of capital requirement. Now, the fixed rate crediting method would have to give that hypothetical account balance another 4% return. So your account would say $312,000, but there's not $312,000 in there. Now, the market-based crediting method, now I'm not 100% sure of how this actually works, but this is how I understand it, and it's probably similar. You would potentially have a negative market-based crediting of 1% here because you have to keep it at least $300,000. So if you lost 1% from 202,000 and you invested 100, you'd be at 300,000 because you can't dip below zero. So now we're in underwater in both situations. The actual account balance is only 296,000, but it's 312,000 with the fixed rate method and 300,000 with the market-based method. So the fixed rate method, you are far underwater. You're up underwater by $16,000. Whereas with the market-based crediting method, it's $4,000 under. Okay. So that's not good, but that's a lot less not good than being $16,000 underwater. You're not likely for the pension to go under and be in trouble when you're only down by $4,000, which is only 1% of the invested capital. Now, let's pretend the market returns, and now you actually get 5% return on the investment the subsequent year. So that's great. Now the entire pool is up to $410,000. Now you're above the $400,000 that was invested. So that's great. You are now no longer in a deficit if you are using the market-based crediting method. Okay, so you can see that over here. There's no more deficit. Now, the actual balance is 410, but with the fixed rate, you should be at 425. So you're still at a $14,000 deficit using the fixed rate method. Because you see here, you're supposed to get 4% every year. And when you get 5% instead of 4%, it's just a small surplus you had. So you're just starting to catch up. Okay. So then the next year you get 5% again. So now you have a little bit, you're going to get a little bit closer. So now with the fixed rate method, your deficit goes down from 14,000 to 10,000. That's good. You do it for another year, 5%. Now the deficit is down to just 5,000. And one more year, you get 5% and your deficit is gone. So now you're actually at a surplus to the fixed rate crediting method. You're at a surplus of $900. So now you're overfunded. So that is actually a nice thing to have a little bit, because if you dip below and get, let's say, 3% next year, you have a little bit of extra to get you closer to 4%. But if you look at the market-based method, you only had a small deficit one year, and all of the remaining years, there's no deficit, because the only requirement with the market-based method is that you stay above water, okay, above zero. You don't have to hit your goal. Now, a lot of cash balance pensions, you'll see that the goal is like 3 or 4%. They often tie it to like the 30-year treasury. And that's because over a number of years, often a pension can meet those numbers, okay? But that's why you often see that the rate of return that they quote is like 4% or 3%. They're often using fixed rate crediting methods. And so any underage, they have to make up, and it's really hard to make up those numbers. With market-based returns or actual rate of return crediting, it doesn't really matter what your goal is. You can say your goal is 5%, but it doesn't really matter. As long as you get above zero, you're okay. So if you're getting a plan open, there's absolutely no question you should have a market-based plan. From everything I understand about this, there's no reason to subject the company to such a substantial risk. And if you use a really low percentage, like 3%, as your fixed rate crediting method, then the other problem is if you get like 5%, then you just have this surplus that the investors don't get either. So it's a lot easier just to have a market-based method, have an allocation like 40-60, and let the investors on their other accounts just design their portfolio to meet their overall goal asset allocation. And whatever the return is of the cash balance plan will fall between like 0% and 5% or whatever it is. And their portfolio, based on how they're designing it, will be accurate, because there won't be like this surplus they don't get to take credit for, and they won't have this underage that they have to deal with. If you're getting a new plan open, this is by far the best way to do it, as far as I know. If you already have a plan open, that's a different situation. And if you're considering getting into the plan, then you have to understand how they're going to deal with a deficit. If the company is just going to take care of the deficit, then that's great. But are you a shareholder of the company, or are you an employee of the company? If you're a shareholder and they're going to take care of it, well, it's still coming off of the bottom line of the profits that get distributed. So it'd be lower. If you're just an employee of the company, then you don't really care how they deal with an underage, because if they're under, they're on the hook to pay for it, right? But often cash balance pension plans are not necessarily open to people who aren't partners of like a private group. I don't know many university systems that use cash balance pensions. I know a lot of universities use more traditional pensions where you accrue your percentage per year and you get a benefit at the end. If you have a cash balance pension at a university setting, I would really like to know that and see how they deal with that, because you're obviously not a shareholder at a university. So please reach out to me if that is a situation that applies to you, because that would be the first one I've heard of, and I'd be really interested to hear more. Okay, that's it for today. Episode number 71. Thank you to all the members of our Facebook community. We're up to like 520 members now, so that's awesome. And again, tune in to the Medicine, Marriage, and Money podcast. available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google Play. Not quite yet. It's there. It's listed, but the new episode has not yet made it out from Libsyn. Hopefully that will get straightened out soon. I will upload this file to the Facebook group for you all to access it should you desire. Until tomorrow, this is not legal, financial, or any other advice. Simply my entertainment and maybe, hopefully, yours. Take care.